These words did give us some comfort, but in another way, they felt like a consolation prize. We didn't really want to be crying at the funeral of our husband and father. This wasn't the way that we prayed things would turn out. And so I thought about King David and his son, Absalom. In the story we heard this morning, the two of them are fighting on opposite sides of the battle. Now, David seems at times to love his sons very deeply, yet he is often an atrocious role model, and he is willing to fight against them to retain his power. Still, he tells his generals, "Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom." There's a certain confidence in his request, although the battlefield and life can be unpredictable. Sparing Absalom is what David asked for, and the thought that the day would turn out otherwise seems not to have worried him too much. It was an order, after all. Still, the Israelites were the people of God. And although David risked losing the throne, I have to feel that as a father, he worried more about the risk of losing his beloved son. So while he was sitting on the sidelines as his son braved the battlefield, did David, the king of the Israelites, pray for Absalom? Did David pray for the outcome? Did David ask God to make everything turn out the way he wanted? "Oh, my son, Absalom, my son, would I had died instead of you." We don't have to even know the details of the story to know that it did not turn out the way David wanted. The depth of his anguish on hearing of Absalom's death is one that we can all feel to the core. Might it also be a response to the despair of feeling his prayers went unanswered? His petitions to God went unheeded. What David may have asked for in the silence of his chamber, with all of his power stripped away from the depth of his heart, is not what the Almighty One delivered to him. Why? Why? There is no doubt that we've all found ourselves in that confounding and desolate place of why. Why didn't God answer my prayer? Why is this happening to me? Why didn't he get better? Why did she die? I've come to believe that when we set our hearts on why, we set ourselves up for a cycle of disappointment and even feeling alienated from God. And that often leads to being angry at God. And so I've come to believe that a more helpful response is not to ask the question why, but to ask the question, what now? What am I called to do next? How do I respond to my disappointment, to my suffering, to my sense of loss, faithfully, in a way that mirrors God's ongoing response within the great cycle of life, death, and resurrection? Lisa Saunders is an Episcopal priest who writes about more than 30 years of officiating at funerals, and she tells the story of Greer York, who is a 19-year-old member of her parish. He fell down a mountain in Tennessee while he was a student at Sewan University. Saunders prayed for Greer. She prayed for his brothers and his parents. En route to the hospital, she prayed for herself. And despite all the prayers of his community, Greer never regained consciousness. And Saunders, the priest, like everyone else, wondered to herself, how can this be happening? Why is a young, healthy person, someone's son, suddenly gone? What good were my prayers? And here's how she began, and we can begin to make peace with all of that. By believing that God doesn't decide who gets sick and who stays healthy, who dies and who survives. By believing that God doesn't cause disease or death to teach us lessons in suffering or to test our perseverance. By believing that God designed a world where all things are free to offer and create beauty, and all things are also free to turn away and make all sorts of errors in judgment and timing that can lead to horrible results. In response, in the vein of what am I to do next, we all can choose to love and forgive and make small gestures and large gestures of kindness and compassion that reach people's lives in ways we might not even know about, that bring about transformation and resurrection that we may never see, when so often the particular outcome to a particular prayer may not be forthcoming. Still, the unexpected and unexplained healing happens. For Greer's mother, there were neither prayers that would cure his traumatic injuries, nor cure her of her heartbreak. But curing is not the same as healing. To cure is to fix. To heal is to make whole. To heal is to see a person and not their situation or their disease. To heal is to honor well-being over perfect health. Many people with illness or injury can be cured. Still many more can be healed. Jesus showed us that again and again. For Greer's mother, healing was to see the church filled on the day of her son's funeral, to see more than 200 people in an overflow room and 800 more gathered to watch on a streaming video. The presence of so many who loved him was the healing balm that she needed. But the size and the scale and the place, none of these really matter. The presence of even one or two can have the same healing effect. As we gather here this morning to pray for healing with and for one another, let's do so not by setting our hearts on why, but by setting our hearts and prayers on what's next, so that we honor and pray for each person as a beloved son or daughter of God, not as a situation or an illness. That we pray not necessarily for cure, but for healing. That we long not to fix each other, for we can't, but to make each one of us whole by offering love and forgiveness and gestures of kindness. This is the balm that we can offer to one another, knowing that a particular outcome to a particular prayer may not be the one we want, but that unexpected and unbidden and unexplaining healing still happens. Amen.
Amen.